Please come in and find a seat. Really happy to host you for the plenary session for thematic area 1, which is around innovation and partnerships for better and more inclusive data. I'm Kate Warren. I'm Executive Vice President and Executive Editor at DevX. We are a news and media platform that covers global development, and I'm very happy and honored to be here with you all in person in Hangzhou, the beautiful city. And I haven't been in China since 2018, so it's really nice to be back to lead this discussion with a very esteemed group of panelists today. Everyone here okay with the mic? So I want to focus in on one key word in this thematic area, and that's inclusive. And we've had a lot of conversations today and throughout the forum so far that focus on innovation and partnerships, but we really want to make sure at the heart of it we are thinking about inclusivity, and that as we think about developing new powerful ways of collecting, disseminating data, as we're thinking about building this data ecosystem, we make sure we're doing so in an inclusive and accessible way for all. So that's something we're going to dig into in this session with a great group of panelists, and we had a few moments to catch up beforehand, and we're really excited to be able to bring this discussion with you today. Just a heads up, we will have an opportunity for some audience questions. So if you have any, jot them down, and we'll try to get to as many as time allows a little later on in the discussion. I would like to then introduce our panelists. So right here to my left, we have Mr. Charles Lebon-Membere Campolo, who is the Director for AIMS Industry Initiative and Next Einstein Forum at the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences. Then we have Mr. Barnaby Akuda, who is the Director of the National Institute of Statistics in Cameroon. We have Mr. Leonardo Trujillo, who's the Deputy Director of DANI, which is Colombia's National Administrative Department of Statistics, who will also be hosting next year, so he's probably taking notes right now. Then we have Ms. Yana Gevorgian, who is the Secretariat of GEO, which is a group on Earth observations. And finally, we have Ms. Catalina Restrepo, who is the Director for Corporate Solutions at Macaya, which is also in Medellin, Colombia. So ask her for tips on what to do next year. So before we get started on talking about inclusive data ecosystems, I really want to talk about what are the stakes of getting this wrong. For example, what does it look like when we are not including everyone, when people are excluded? Really, why is this so important? And Mr. Barnaby Akuda, I would love to hear your perspective, particularly from the National Institute of Statistics in Cameroon, around why is inclusivity in data important to you?
Thank you, Kate, and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the One Data Forum Program Committee for the opportunity given to me to share my humble point of view on this topic. When we say mathematically what's wrong, that means we are not on the right path. And taking into account the takeaway from the opening ceremony yesterday and what we heard this morning at the plenary session, and concerning in other part, the leitmotif of the agenda, that means leave no one behind. That means we need to embark everyone in this ship of sustainable development. And according to this point of view, if inclusion is now considered, that means everyone should be in and not off track. And that, if then we are wrong, that means we will miss the main objective of the agenda. And if we meet all the objective of the agenda and all the targets associated, that means we will still have more and more poverty. We will have less environmental care. And by the way, the more climate change damage we are facing now, we should continue to face weak governance and violence that brings conflict around the world. And in one word, we will maintain, and the main risk is to maintain and to entertain the vicious circles of regress instead of progress we are expecting at the end of the agenda in 2030.
And Yana, I'd love to bring you in. Do you have any examples of when this has not gone well and what the ramifications are of that, and why do you think inclusivity in data is so important to the work you do?
Yeah, in Colombia we have some examples, but I want to add something. As you were saying, for us, education is one of the points that we have to put under the table, because if we don't give the skills, if we don't teach them how to have critical thinking, how to read, how to analyze data, so we are not going to have inclusive ecosystem. And in Colombia, a big example is not only data, but for example, access to internet. If we don't have access in the country, so those community doesn't have the opportunity to have data, so they don't have the numbers to take them to analyze and to come up with some good ideas to change their communities. We also doesn't have open data as well. So I think we need more, more opportunities or more accessibility, not only to education, but also to internet, to start having data on top of everybody.
Jana, do you have any thoughts from your perspective?
Sure, thank you very much. Well, let me start from the end of your question. What are the stakes of not getting it right? And I think at best, we'll just miss out on an opportunity to deliver greatest impact. And at its worst, we might just get things really, really wrong. Where inclusivity has worked well is where, from the data perspective, we've seen different types of data really be put together into a single pot to really develop a solution that is solving a challenge. And from the human perspective, when we involved anyone from the government and businesses and citizens involved in that solution. One of my favorite cases, in fact, is around solving the issue of human health sort of impacted from exposure to extreme heat. There are really great cases around the world. I know one in the United States very well where the government agencies with industry partners have engaged the local communities to map urban heat islands and put that data in a visual, sort of visualized way on the map by creating that, first of all, visualized map of where extreme heat happens around the cities, and then develop solutions for interventions that will prevent and mitigate the risk of human exposure to that extreme heat. And in the process, we've achieved actually utilization, creating value of data that otherwise would just be that, just data. We've also involved citizens in the process of mapping in a very hands-on way, thereby creating the culture and awareness of being tuned in to the problem and the solutions that exist. And I think to me that represents really the best of all worlds, of data being put to use to realize its value and impact human behavior around a particular issue.
Yeah, that's the point I'd love to follow up a little bit further on in the panel. But Leonardo, I'd love to hear, how do you see innovation playing a role in creating more inclusive data systems? And do you have any examples, particularly from your context in Colombia?
Yeah, well, inclusion is one of the biggest challenges for the Colombian government at the moment. Colombia is a country which is undergoing through a very important moment in political terms. We signed a peace agreement in 2016, and then the government is addressing a series of historic exclusions of different population groups, including indigenous, Afro-descendants, LGBT population, displaced farmers, disabled people. Our challenge here as a statistical office is provide the baseline upon which public policy can be made. As such, we have launched an initiative to allow us to carry the first LGBT survey in the country. And also after the signature of the peace agreement, Colombia created the Truth Commission, which had as its main task to investigate, clarify, and address the impunity to violent acts and human rights violations occurred through the Colombian armed conflict. Regarding methodologies also, in order to get these very specific disaggregations for these specific population groups, we are working with small area estimation methods and also with the integration of administrative registers and the use of alternative sources of information, like, for example, the use of satellite imagery in order to get these very specific local geographical populations.
And Charles, how have you seen innovation play a role in the work you do across the African continent? Do you have any examples?
Yes, thank you very much, Kate, and thanks to the Secretariat of the UN World Data Forum. I think innovation brings fresh idea, and when it comes to sustainable development goals, I believe that we need to ensure that we're accelerating the work that we are doing, but we also need a sense of moving forward to move beyond what we used to do, and come out with tools, technology that can be used to reach out to the set of data that goes maybe beyond statistics. With mobile penetration, for example, in Africa, we believe that if we did not have mobile, we wouldn't be where we are in terms of delivering the type of service that we are delivering. One example is mobile money in Africa. Not everyone has a bank account in Africa, but with a piece of device. This is not only smartphones, these are feature phones. Small older farmers are accessing those kind of technology in their own language, in their own context, and is actually helping them to be a little bit financially included. So those are kind of examples I'll put in there. But it really depends on the context and the background, because different countries have different contexts and different backgrounds. So I believe innovation is just a way for us to say, there's a way to do things differently because of the way we define the problem in those kind of very specific contexts, yes.
Yeah, and governments aren't necessarily the most set up for leading on innovation, which really begs the role of partnerships, right, with other actors, private sector, civil society. So Catalina, I'd love to hear about experience you have in different kinds of partnerships that you explore to further innovation in data ecosystems within Colombia. Do you have any examples of how that works? And I'm sure there are examples of it maybe working well, less well. Maybe you can share an example of it working well that others could learn from in the room.
Actually, we have two beautiful examples in different regions, partnering not only with private but also with the public sector. The first one was a program that we had in Medellin. We distribute some sensors to quality of earth so community can understand and use those data for making up decisions. So we distribute these kind of systems, and in a platform they can see if the sensor was green or was orange or was red. So it's an easy way to understand data. The system also has some letters and some notes, so communities can make up decisions with that. What happened after? Of course, we train them to give information. We teach them how to use the platform as well and the technology. And I'm going to tell you two nice stories about the sensors. The first one was an old lady that has asthma. She decides to put one sensor on her house, and when she used it when she turned it on to see how was the weather and the earth that day, she decides to go or not out because of the asthma. So if the weather is okay and the earth is okay, she gets out of her house. But another one was like in a community, each Tuesday at 2 p.m. the sensors start getting red, and after this the alarm starts woo, woo, woo. So everybody says, like, what's going on the Tuesday at 2 p.m.? So communities start talking about the situation and start talking with the community. And they realized that one person was burning trash. So of course, because of the smoke, the sensors start turning on. So based on that data, easy to analyze, simple for the community, they start creating strategies to communicate to community how to use the trash, where to put it, not to burn it. So that was great because we were partnering with two different, both sectors, to improve quality of earth in Medellin, that sometimes we have some issue for it. Do you want me to share another example?
Well,
or
actually,
maybe not, because we don't have enough time.
No, yeah, that's great. I'd love to hear from Jana about who you see being the partners that really need to come to the table, and what more do you want to see from partners? Obviously, there's a lot of power in partnership, and how do you see that working well, and what would you like to see more of?
So coming from a perspective of an international organization, a multilateral platform, we're tuning a lot into the conversations about the need to reimagine multilateralism. In 2021, I think the UN Secretary General put out Our Common Agenda report, which actually called for, it was brilliant because it recognized that multilateralism as it has existed is really not going to allow us to meet our challenges at pace, right? And so we do need to reimagine multilateralism and start to include, as I said earlier, businesses, cities, civil society, citizens in this concept of partnerships. Yet, I really think partnership exists throughout. We don't even see them, but there is nothing that's currently done just by a single entity, by a single sector alone. So I think they're omnipresent, and that's a wonderful thing. We just need to actively promote the culture of, even within our own societies, within our own countries, to be a little more open to changing our ways, to moving away from traditional methods, and leaning into new approaches. And that is probably at the country level is the hardest to achieve. We had a session earlier today where we heard from our audience that oftentimes it's exactly that, at the level of national government, not at a global scale, that those inclusive partnerships are the hardest to actually incentivize. And oftentimes we do need that political leadership to send down the mandate and say, this is going to be how we approach the solution of our greatest challenges. So I think if I were to wish on a star, I would say that. I would say within the national context, there has to be more political will to incentivize the creation of that culture that at a country and subnational level incentivizes us, facilitates those public, private, and civil partnerships and collaborations.
Yeah, and Charles, I'd love to bring you in. We were actually before talking about the power of private sector partnerships, and many of the private sector companies are global and multinational. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to partner, but on a national level, with companies that may be looking at more global and less focused on national scale, and how you align those incentives with the private sector to really create powerful impact that is going to have to help their bottom line, right? But also is going to make sure it's aligned with the goals of a national government and how they want to move their data system forward.
Thank you very much for that question. I like partnership, and as the previous speaker mentioned, we also learned from the morning contribution, and I will take one word that Stefan mentioned in the morning about data traffic. And my takeaway is that at the end of the day, we are serving the same people. At the end of the day, it's about people. So the data that you are collecting, the data that you are sharing or sending from point A to point B is about people. And people are citizens for countries. We need to ensure that government play a key role in that. But also acknowledge that government might not have the necessary resources, funding, legal framework to do the thing that they want to do. But I will give you an example of going to a football match where you only have one team, you score only on one direction, and the referee is also one, the referee is part of that team. I think it's important for us to do it together. The government should help us actually set the priorities, which sometimes is not, I'll be very careful, aligned with the priority of the business, but the government should acknowledge that private sector might come with the resources that they don't have. They might come already with legal framework or infrastructure that the government doesn't have. It's very important to bring the private sector, the civil society on board, and we shouldn't exclude them. So in partnership, I want to do, we need to innovate in partnership. We need to make partnership more inclusive so that don't exclude people. But at the end of the day, we are serving people because these people have rights. When I manage projects, I don't look at people like a number in a spreadsheet. These people have rights which you need to protect. So as you're putting forward your model, we need to ensure that we are serving people, and these people, what they call privacy should be actually protected. Now, the question people ask is, who should drive the development of those framework? Because maybe the government at the time does not have the capacity, they don't have the resources to do that. But the private sector should always believe that at the beginning, and when I do partnership, I don't like MOU and signing it and putting there. I think we need to be intentional in the digital world that we are, so that we don't take inclusivity and the citizen privacy an add-on in our partnership. We need to ensure that at the beginning we're doing the things right? So that's the way I really wanted to take partnership to say, yes, government, private sector should run the business depending on the business model. The last thing I wanted to talk about is when you look at private sector in the continent I'm coming from, Africa, they are multinationals. We acknowledge them. They're big players. But you also have small and medium enterprises, the startups. And if you look at what the startups are doing in Africa in terms of being innovative, I wouldn't compare the two, but I will acknowledge that they are tackling very specific issues in our community that has value. So for me, when you look at private partnership to look at the private sector, government should acknowledge that maybe those startups do not have the framework, they might not have the skills, they might not have the infrastructure like the big multinational, but they play a key role. And I will end by saying, can we give the civil society the space on the table so that they can contribute to, one, do some need assessment to say what is missing in this kind of equation, and how do we work together so that we're doing the right thing? Because at the end of the day, if we really want to accelerate sustainable development goals, we need to do it right. That's actually my perspective.
Barnaby, I'd like to bring you into this. And how do you see private sector as a partner for you in the work you're doing in Cameroon? And maybe that dichotomy of big multinational companies versus local, smaller private sector. How do you partner with them, and what more would you like to see in making those partnerships successful?
According to partnership, what we see in our country is that generally in formal and traditional practice, national statistical system used to be based on formal method and theories. But now, we are in a globalized economy and more digitalized world, things are moving faster. So we can no longer be relying on the traditional methods. And the trade-off will be, according to me, not on the traditional way that trade-off means we need to choose. But the trade-off we should expect now should be inclusive, not exclusive. That means putting things together. This morning we followed the presentation of the CBS for the monitoring the SDG. That is not based on the formal and traditional way of doing things in statistical system. So we need to be together, bring the private sector and civil society, and to complement what is missing from the traditional approach in statistical service and methods. That's why we expect that in the day forward, according to the needs, when things are on an emergency approach, we need data on the spot. And that we can use, and we have to use the different sources of data, either civil society, private sector, or traditional, which is national statistical system. But on the long term, we should need to come back for structural method and analysis and prospect. We need to come back to the formal and structural analysis of data.
Yeah, and that really talks about balancing the timeliness and accuracy of data with inclusivity, and it can be challenging in a emergency situation, a disaster or a health emergency we maybe all experienced a few years ago. I think COVID was a crash course in this. So Leonardo, how do you think about that and balancing the accuracy, timeliness with inclusivity and how you approach data?
Well, I think there is a trade-off between cultural identity also and representativeness, because sometimes in surveys, some questions are addressed to specific communities that these communities, maybe because they have a different language or because they have different cultural aspects, they cannot understand. So I think we need a very strong work in identifying these cultural needs in order to get representativeness and very reliable data that we get from these communities. So I think this is a trade-off that we have to work on.
And Charles, when we talked about working with private sector, they move a lot faster, right? They can move a lot faster than governments can. I think we've seen that, and a lot of concerns around data privacy, data security, and particularly when we're talking about inclusivity and talking about bringing in the most vulnerable and really making sure that we're not putting their data and security at risk. So how do you think about finding that balance of data privacy and security and navigating that, particularly when the private sector is often the ones leading in this and the government is kind of playing catch up?
Very complex. I don't think I have an answer, and the audience.
You can't solve that for us today?
Exactly, it's complex, but that's what I was saying. That I think the word that I'm taking here is to be intentional, and to remind people that people have a common ground. I remember my example of not looking at people like spreadsheet or some whatever is actually moving online. People have feeling they have right. And I think my take on this is really to strengthen the government capacity in making sure that they can put forward policies that can regulate. Africa has 54 countries, so if I give you a map of countries and whether or not they are ready, is quite very different. And I was just talking to you to say, are the SDG common purpose? Is the private sector coming on board to develop whatever business they are developing to make money? Is nothing wrong about it. They pay tax, they help our economy to move forward. But it's not contradictory to say you can still do that within the framework of this is the country I'm working on, this is the context. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of best practices to say, oh, maybe the country that you're operating in does not have that kind of framework, but what is known out there that you can learn from? I think we need to be very intentional. A partnership is something like we are together. It's not like, oh, you are there. And people are not necessarily in those rooms where we sign MOUs. I believe the civil society should come on board. We also need to give them a space so that they can ask the question that some people feel very uncomfortable to do that. So, and private sector for me, again, I will repeat it, is not only multinational. There's a lot of startups in Africa that need to be in those rooms, in those conversations to see how are they looking forward in putting forward those kind of solutions that they want. So yes, it's all together. It shouldn't be a blaming game. A partnership should be, what are we learning? But I believe we shouldn't continue doing things that we have been doing in the past, because that's your question about, we got it wrong, and inclusivity, human rights shouldn't be an add-on. It should be something that we think at the beginning of it. We should ask that question at the beginning before we even stand up. So that for me is, we need to be a little bit ambitious when we put forward this kind of partnership. And we need to have measures in place so that we can check, there's some check and balances. That's why I believe that the civil society should play a role. And citizens also have a way maybe also to voice or appreciate this kind of technology that is out there. Are there a way for us to capture the feedback? The user experience, because maybe some people can sign up for a platform that they thought that you're helping them, but on the background, technical people like us, we know what we are collecting. Is that clear from everyone? And when you come to Africa, 54 countries, people have their own language, their own context. You need to ensure that you are serving those people who are not from the very same background. So that's my approach. But government need to be strengthened capacity. Civil society should come on board, and I think this platform provide us with the opportunity to have this kind of discussion to say, as takeaway, how do we go back to our country to say, can you do some need assessment to say, where is Congo-Brazzaville, where I'm coming from in terms of those framework? They don't exist. And where do you start? Can you have kind of some journey? Can you support them? Those are the things that I will recommend. I don't think that I answer your question, but it's quite very difficult. Right?
Well, your point about using SDGs as a framework and that being really powerful for facilitating partnerships, but also a danger is it's created a kind of very siloed approach to how we solve these big, massive, interconnected challenges. And Jana, so I'd love to hear your perspective on this and how we think about breaking down some of the silos that happen as we think about partnerships and data and how it impacts kind of everything across the SDGs in a way that isn't necessarily distinct.
We have an agency right to my right, Dani, that's leading in that space, in fact, of leveraging multiple sources of data to really chart their pathway to implementing SDGs, because it's not just about monitoring and reporting, it's actually achieving those. It's implementing towards achievement of sustainable development. And within the group on Earth observation, we have been running an awards program for 3-4 years where we recognize different partners within government, industry, and civil society for using different data towards SDG achievement. And Dani, I think, has been a recipient at least once, maybe more than once. So maybe Leonardo is actually better positioned to speak about it. But I do think it's, I'm going to say maybe something that's, well, it's not even provocative because it's no surprise, but there's this one ingredient that's always very helpful when you try to put together a solution, and that's finance. It has this really magic quality of making things happen. And I think if we can truly come to a table with the willing partners around a particular solution with finance that will begin, it's an incentive, that will begin to allow them to get access to resources, whether it's data, whether it's human resources, whether it's training, to see for themselves how their own methods and their own work can actually get easier if they incorporate satellite observations towards mapping, towards surveying certain areas. We talked about timeliness and accuracy. As long as we are using tools that are fit for purpose with the right understanding, we might in fact discover that we can have savings in the budget from not doing a field survey of something that can be more easily, faster, and more cheaply done by using Earth observation. But to even give that opportunity to just experiment with all of that, I think finance is a really important component of it. And so I do have to recognize those philanthropists, those governments, those foundations and industry that are in fact putting the resources towards enabling that change, the culture change. And then we do need to count on the governments, again, to want to own these new systems, these new solutions, hopefully on the basis of having tested it and seen that it, in fact, is driving efficiency, better results, and better timeliness.
So Leonardo, since you were given as a great example of what to do at Dani, so are there some secrets that you can share with everyone about these awards you won and how you're doing it well?
What we have discovered is that censuses have a very good disaggregation of information, but the timeliness is not very good because you have to do it every 10 years. Whereas surveys, you have very good timeliness because you have monthly, quarterly surveys, but you cannot disaggregate very good because of terms of representativeness. So that's why we have worked with administrative registers and other sources of information in order to get more granularity in the data, but also more repeated operations and more timeliness operations, and we have worked in that. But it's very important also to acknowledge the value of citizen-generated data, as well as other international efforts, such, for example, open data partnerships, like, for example, GODAN, that is an open agricultural and nutritional data, Gapminder, and also IPUMS, that allow us to get better census data. So is not only the new methods that you have to apply in order to improve the trade-off between timeliness and disaggregation and accuracy, is also the work with citizen-generated data and also open data partnerships.
Catalina, I'd love to hear about what are some of the biggest challenges that you see in organizations really embracing a data revolution? What are some of the real practical obstacles that get in the way?
Okay, I'm going to give obstacles based on civil society, because normally private and public sector have different issues, but on my land, I think the first one, as I said at the beginning, is education, because communities and people who work in civil society organizations doesn't have the skills to analyze data, to have put it in place and to see how they can use it, how they can feel a part of it. So first, we have to start thinking a different way of education, and we have to start closing the gap because the skills are not done at school. Second one, I think because civil society are not part of the discussion, we have to, as you tell, we have to invite them to the conversation. We have to invite them to the table so they feel they're part of it. And also trust, because of course we have many data, but data are in governments, but they don't feel that they're representative on those data. So they think, okay, this is not true, this is not about me, I don't care about that, I don't understand. So also we have, especially in LATAM, we have to build trust about data so they can feel part of it. I'm going to leave those three because I think that's most important,
That's great,
like
yeah.
education, trust, and yeah, be part of the discussion, because otherwise they're not going to be part of it. And we need those voices in the discussion.
Yeah, well, several of you have mentioned the need for capacity building and new skills development. Charles, you work a lot on this. What are some of those skills, and what are some successful ways in building that, not only for the future statisticians and data experts, but those who are already working on these issues, particularly in thinking about inclusivity? And what are you seeing working on in the African continent and some of the work you do in this space?
Actually, I want to add like another small question. How people that are not in this field can be part of the conversation?
Yeah.
Because if you're a statistic, you can understand, you can have a conversation, you can take the data. What are we going to do for those that, there's a huge mindset about numbers and math are only for smart people. Mm-hmm. We have to take those mindset out of the table.
Yeah, and making it accessible too.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what we do at EMS. We believe that the next action is going to be on Africa. We have a network of centers of excellence across the continent in South Africa, Cameroon, Senegal, Rwanda, and Ghana. So to your question about how do we build capacity, that's what I used to do. And the way I want to answer this question, like I don't foresee the world where all statisticians are going to go back to school and do data science and then for them to tick the box. It's not going to work, because these people need to ensure that they help the National Office of Statistics to do the work. What we have seen is, because of the digital world, there's some gap moving beyond statistics, because big data is coming with the volume of data that you really need a new set of skills. And as an academic and research institution and training, we need to do the need assessment to say, what are you talking about? This is a statistician A who has been working here for years and years. They know exactly what they're doing. I think my colleague were talking about the methodology and things like that. We're not going to change that. That's the foundation. But we are going to actually include and integrate data that is not coming from the system that we know. You shouldn't expect these people to be like they can pick it up. We need to build capacity. One is really to have critical mass of data scientists. I don't know even in this room in every country whether you know how many data scientists you need in your country in 20 years. EMS is trying to do it on the African continent to scale that. Two is to say the statisticians are there. We need to ensure that we can do some gap analysis in terms of what we want them to do versus what they have, and build not like a degree type of program, but some short courses, which is quite light. While they're on the work, they can still be top up. I think in Rwanda we have the National Office of Statistics has a data science campus, and those kind of the infrastructure is quite very important. And three, I think in terms of leadership, because capacity is not only technical. Capacity, as my colleague says, also change your mindset. Mathematics is not
Only for smart people.
mathematics is not only for smart people. I think it's just manipulating numbers. So mathematics is not S and Y. Mathematics is also about the meaning of X and Y in climate change and in Earth observation. I think we need to build capacity for the leaders of this institution to understand how do they adopt technology. They shouldn't be afraid of this. But I don't think that we have a choice because the world is changing. I think we need to ensure that the Director General will promote technology adoption. They should actually upskill their staff. They should also put in place a program to get the fresh mind. And I like the way that we should do it together. It's not like them versus us. I think those are the things. But in terms of the barrier, I've seen that there are barriers that are technical, which is the infrastructure and all the math. But there are also barriers that are non-technical. It can be just an what you call a legal framework that people don't have. We believe that we need to do this kind of assessment and come out with a strategy to say, are you on board? MC is there, we can help. Can we develop short courses? Can we develop some courses that touch the leadership? How do we change the mindset of the population that have been working without social media? Now we're in the social media revolution. How the world is actually evolving. I think we need to be a little bit agile in the way we design this kind of capacity building. That's my
Yeah, well, and I think, as you mentioned, Catalina, doing data statistics has felt very out of reach for many people. And but it's very important to be able to communicate these, because ultimately it's to drive action and behavior change, right? To use data to inform how to do things better. I'm curious to hear if anyone on the panel has thoughts around AI and its power of helping to build capacity of people who maybe aren't statisticians, but can very easily analyze large amounts of data that will help further enable the skills to be able to do this, but then also any of the pitfalls. For example, we're trying to talk about inclusivity in this panel, and I think there's a lot of concerns around AI and the quality of the data and building in biases. So I'll just throw this out. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? And how do you see AI either helping to enable your capacity to handle data, and then maybe any concerns you might have with it? Go ahead.
Okay. Before talking of AI, what we need, according to the perspective of developing countries, is what we call data and statistical literacy. Because that means we need to build a bridge between science, pure science, that comes from mathematics and statistics and AI, build this bridge from the science to the common people, to democratize the use of data and statistics. And after that, we can move to AI. This thing of electronic device, yes. We made a survey in several countries in Africa to scan the level of use of electronic device. So the gap is still important. So we need first to fill this gap with data and statistical literacy, digital literacy, before moving to AI. And then AI, once we are at this level, you can integrate the AI in the production and the utilization of data and statistics.
Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I will add to say, I would say AI for good, because I look at AI as a tool for us to do things that we couldn't do. If you look at AI, there's the amount of data that you need to access, and there's the logic or algorithm that you need to build for us to be more smart. If you ask human beings to do that using past technology, it would take more time, more resources. So AI is, for us, is a tool that allows us to do things quickly. But technology, every technology has a good side and a bad side. I think we need to ensure that we're using this kind of technology and playing with people's data for good. And I think the reason we are here in this room is because for sustainable development goal. Now, how do you regulate the way we're actually pushing AI? It's just one of the emerging technology, but I believe we should look at AI from the good side, but not also forget that the other side, that people might actually use the tool to actually harm us. So there are things about AI for good, the ethic, and all these things that we at AMS, we are developing a program for. It's the African Master in Machine Intelligence. It's founded by Google and Facebook. We are training the AI engineer, but we are taking the ethics side of it very, very seriously. We don't want to use the tool to harm people. We want to use the tool for good. There's a lot of conversations over
Yeah, and
there.
it's moving so fast. So it is, again, innovation moves quicker than regulation can, and so it's a new frontier. Jana, thoughts?
Yeah, I think Charles actually blew my bubble or stole my thunder, so I'm not going to repeat what he said. But I think I'm just going to maybe come in between the two, Barnaby and Charles. For Earth observation, without doubt, AI is really helpful because it does help with change detection a lot quicker. I think of the ethics really, really on the back end, because it's still people behind it all for processing the imagery, right, to train this artificial intelligent machine learning. And I'm really hoping that the companies that are really developing this capability are putting in place ethical processes from the labor perspective to ensure that this whole technology is powered on proper ethics. But that's not what you asked. I think, again, I think especially at the national level, the great enabler is a common framework strategy. Let's say a country adopting an actual digital transformation strategy. Because that digital transformation strategy really should encompass all of the layers, from ensuring connectivity in the country, security, standards, data sharing, all of it. So having that kind of an end-to-end, again, it's a culture through whether it's an executive order or legislature ideally, that really involves all of these layers, procurement, so that you don't have one ministry spending resources from the budget to acquire certain data, but only for that purpose, and then this ministry will have to expend budget from their side to also purchase data. So a digital transformation strategy and policy really should think through all of those components that have to go hand in hand to really transform the way the government, the local industry, and the citizens interact with that data towards powering relevant solutions.
Yeah, well, I'd love to ask Barnaby and Leonardo, as leading government agencies, that think about, how do you think about your digital transformation strategy, and what are some of the challenges in being able to achieve that at true scale? So, yeah, Leonardo, you can go first.
Well, as I mentioned before, working with the integration of administrative registers is part of the digital transformation that we need. But also we need some collaboration with the academia in order to get this statistical literacy that we have discussed, that sometimes is a pitfall in order to get statistics for inclusive data. And also, I think part of the digital transformation is achieved by external partners, not only in order to get more finance aid, but also in order to get trained sponsorship, and in order to get training for the staff, as we mentioned before. Yeah.
Barnaby?
Okay. There is a program led by United Nations Commission Economic for Africa, based on we're dealing with transformation and modernization of statistics in Africa. And I'm so happy that since the World Data Forum 1, Cape Town, up to now, there's a major change. We can all notice that we are now talking about data and statistical system, not only statistical system. It's a major change. That means, as in the inclusive philosophy, there's no more conflict between data scientists and statisticians. We accept to go together. And that is a milestone, very good one for us. And this implies the the way of doing things together. And for that, the main challenges remains, as we all said since World Data Forum 1, that is capacity building in different domains. That means from institutional domain, we need to adapt and change our legislation to bring all these actors together in different countries and in the region and at the global level. As we saw it this morning with the CBAS, how can Cameroon national system can contact the CBS to access the data they produce from the satellite. That means we need to adapt our legislation to be in line with this. At the human resources, we need also to improve the human resource in our country in this different domain. And at the end, we have the problem of infrastructure. We all face the problem of energy. We cannot access to internet in the rural area, even in the main city in some African countries, you cannot access to internet. All these things, based on big data, we need internet, we need energy. So capacity building remains a major challenge in all domains to ensure the transformation and modernization of data and statistical. Thank you.
Well, I want to be able to open up the floor for audience questions. So I think we do have some people running around with mics in case you have any. And the virtual audience, I know you can submit questions as well. But while we wait for any of those questions to come through, I do want to give a shout out to a meetup that's happening right now and joining us virtually in Macau. So we have a group of 90 speakers and 300 guests led by Rector Marwala with the theme of dealing with the data dilemma. They couldn't be here in person, but they've gathered together in Macau and are following along and watching this plenary. So we want to say hi. We're sorry you can't be here in person, but we're so glad you can join us online, and we're very excited that you're able to use this opportunity to drive these important conversations forward. This will also be followed by a youth-led online conference organized by their interns and volunteers, so we really want to wish them the best of luck with their event, and thank you for joining virtually. But do we have any questions in the audience? And you can raise your hand, and then I believe there are some folks with microphones that can run around. Or you can shout loud and I'll try to hear. Let's see, I think we have a couple back here. But before we do have one that came from the virtual audience, as how can data silos be bridged? For example, can government-held data on educational enrollment data and tax income data be shared to provide better indicators? Anyone have any thoughts about, I think Jana and Leonardo, you both mentioned having siloed systems within governments, but how do you think about sharing data across your government for shared purposes? Stumper for Leonardo, do you have?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, just thinking about siloed data, for example, educational enrollment data, tax income data, how those different systems can share those data in ways that they could probably help benefit from each other.
How we can integrate the system is more like,
yeah,
and then we can have cross information.
I guess that's part of that digital transformation strategy, and I think a lot of work in this space is also being, Yanni mentioned financing, right? Financing by different funders, and different funders will come in and finance different projects and don't necessarily all talk and collaborate, often reinventing the wheel. But do you have any thoughts on better ways to approach this?
What we use is what we generally call coordination. We need to have, in our country, we have a coordinated system. That means all land ministries are linked to the National Statistical Office when you have a decentralized system. But we have different countries. We saw the example today of Norway, where they have a centralized system, and Canada, where the NSO produces statistics for everyone. but in some countries we have decentralized way. In this moment, what is important is to have a good coordination, a strong coordination system. That means the standard and methodology are under the umbrella of the National Statistical System, and the land ministries and all the administrative services have to comply with this standard and method in order to have the good statistics and we can compare and use at international level.
Thank you. Randy. Let's see, do we have any questions? Okay, we got one back there.
Hi, is it working? Yes.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Sayonara. I'm from the Danish Institute for Human Rights, and I have a follow-up question to Charles. Charles, you said at some point that inclusivity and human rights should be placed at the center, at the beginning of the process, and not as an add-on. And it's really, really nice to hear like-minded speakers on this as well. And I would be very interested and curious to hear if you have examples to share on how you are doing that in practice and putting human rights and inclusivity at the center and at the beginning of the process to, for inspiration for all of us here in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Charles, you're in the hot seat.
So I will start by saying I have 3 girls, so plus my wife who is a complicated girl, I have 4. So I'm a minority in my house. And when I run program, I put like gender. Just give one example. Inclusivity is not only gender, for the sake of argument. So I say it's 50-50. So I'm recruiting, you need to find me 50% of a woman first before you. I want to represent my house in that program, right? If you're not bold enough, at EMS, for example, it's very difficult to find women because in STEM, if you look at the statistics, you only have few women. But we are intentional, we are bold enough, and we set it as a criteria, it's a KPI. I think I should acknowledge a colleague from Rwanda. Rwanda is doing very well. Look at the Rwanda government, the parliament, they're setting the boundary very high. My answer to your question is that it's possible. That's what I would say. It is possible. It might be hard, but it's possible to do it. And you need to be very intentional.
Let's see, any other questions, any hands here? I see one in the front and one over here.
Thank you, first of all, to the panel for the amazing insights. Appreciate it. Charles, on inclusivity, I am one of the leaders and founders of a woman-led data company, which is rare in itself. So my question really kind of comes back to this point on data literacy. And there's 2 parts to it. One is the program itself, and the second is the adoption of data literacy. What I really want to understand is what are some of the frameworks, or has there been any thought around a consistent framework across the globe, a global framework for data literacy to address the issue of really creating citizen data scientists and really helping the global community to start leveraging the data, understanding the data, and using the data, adopting the actual data to make decisions the right way and in an accurate fashion. Thank you.
That's a comment.
Charles, or I don't know if Yana, you have thoughts on that from a global perspective.
I was just thinking if Dilik is in the room, because there are people in this audience who actually do citizen data, and they're amazing. Oh, there she is. There she is. she could really. She's just 4 rows behind you. I really would have loved to turn this question over to her because she can give you a
Well, you can pass the mic over.
a stupendous response about how citizen data was actually acquired in Ghana and used by the government. Anyway, I'm not going to steal it from her. She really can do this justice.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yana, for calling me here. It's really great to hear that, and it's great to see you here, and great you all here, and it's a very interesting panel. And I'm not going to take your time here to talk about citizen science, but we have a session on Thursday at 2:30 p.m. So please join us when we're talking about how we can build trust in citizen science data using exactly the example that Yana was talking about on how we integrated citizen science beach litter data into the official statistics of Ghana. So I think it's a good example, and we have other examples to share with you, so please join us. Thank you.
Great. Well, great plug for another
And this was
session.
not planned, by the way.
Oh, that's great. I know we had a question right up here in the front row. Someone can run over with a mic to the front row. Okay. Yeah, right here in the middle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the panel. It was so great and interesting and very insightful session. My name is Prim, and I am a youth representative. So I would like to take about, what about youth representing youth voices on how we can foster innovation and partnership for better and more inclusive data? So young people, we are taking part in contributing fresh ideas, transforming action in our communities, in our national, international collaboration in ourselves. So it's really different key things that has mentioned about capacity building and how young people ourselves can empower other young people as well, and how we can also have a capacity building with innovation, with AI, artificial intelligence, digital inclusivity, and some parts that would make our actions really go forward into having funding and financing for data, and actually use data for financing as well to address the vulnerable groups, vulnerable people to be addressed, and creating a larger impact for larger people. So as I'm working with AI, artificial intelligence, and data science, I would like to ask a question about our gender responsive AI training models, because we train AI based on data, and we need data to be inclusive, to have an AI model that we can implement it in different services, in different organizations, to be inclusive, to be gender responsive, to be accessible, and to be open to everyone, to be timely, and to be a quality data. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Excellent questions. I know, Catalina, do you have thoughts on how you involve youth in your data work and ensuring, empowering youth?
Sorry, say again.
How to empower youth in your work in data and data collection and citizen activated data, and how youth can have a voice and be a powerful contributor to it.
How we can empower the communities could be, like the way we used to do it, like the way we work with them is to make them, like to take a real example of what they used to do. For example, we were working with some farmers that grow coffee trees, so they have some crops, and we use the farm and all the strategic they use to grow the tree, and we take data with some sensors and with the technical advisors, and we sit with them and we start to explaining like how the weather, how humidity, how water, how many fertilizants they have to put in the plants. So when we sit with them and we take the data and we explain how this and you can cross it, and we make it simple for them, is the way we empower them to start using data with basic things they used to do in life. So this is with the farmers. The other one was with earth, and the other ones could be in another farm with coconuts, depending on what they used to do in their natural days.
Yeah, Charles, do you have thoughts on this? Obviously, the African continent has a very large youth population.
Thank you very much, Kati. Thanks for that question, and I'm glad that you're in the room, because in 2065, most of us are not going to be in this room, and we need to ensure that we are preparing the world for the youth. So at EMS, we have, as I said, EMS has a training program, research innovation, and public engagement. Under the public engagement, we made a bold statement to say, can we, because Africa is complex, 54 countries, so we have a program called the Next Ancient Forum Ambassadors Program. We just recruited, I lead that. We recruited 54 ambassadors, so one per country, and their role is exactly that, to say, if you are selected, you need to go down the way, because we know up is scientists and things like that, to mobilize the youth. Get them play with those kind of technology, because young people have a way that they want to learn. In the past, there was a way like, I'm a teacher, I'm communicating. With technology, when you play, you can discover things. So with the Next Ancient Forum Ambassadors Program, we have things like the African Science Week. Depending on funding, when we receive funding, we mobilize the whole continent with young people in their own community, their own language, to give them a device and for them to test it. Just try to see, touch it, And then we explain to them to explain to them to see, do you know what is actually happening? Because young people like playing, right? I think we need to raise awareness. We need to make training less intimidating. It should be in the classroom. We need to provide opportunity for them to engage more, but we need also to listen to the youth. Because they might do things better than what we thought, right? So yes, those are kind of a type of program that we have. It's under the public engagement, where we go really in rural area, in community, in their own language. But we just need to put together something, say, go and touch it and tell me what you're actually learning from that device. It worked, but at MS maybe we are privileged because we have 54 countries covered because of the ambassadors program. So that's what I can share in terms of what we're doing in terms of youth engagement.
Actually, I want to add another thing. Like in Colombia, we have an issue with young people. If they're living in the rural area, they want to leave the rural area to get into the countryside. So what we're doing as you are doing, we are giving them technology and we're teaching them code so they can create own solutions to their houses or to their farms, so they can see technology as a good strategy to be in the field, to keep being part of the countryside, so we can, of course, keep economy growing, and we let them play and become with solutions they need in their houses.
Well, I think we are going to need to wrap up our panel here soon. Thank you all for the questions. Sorry, we can't take more. But I would love to hear from each of the panelists, kind of your one call to action to everyone in this room on how, or something they can take away on how to integrate innovation, partnerships, and really think about inclusivity at the core of their work. What should they prioritize? What would you like for them to leave the room with today? Charles, I'll start with you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this very intimidating panel with great colleagues. What I would say is, one, we need to do an assessment of things that worked, because we started this kind of forum since Cape Town. So it's been some time. So there are things and initiatives that have worked, but also understand that there are something that did not work, and how do we learn from that? For things that did not work, we need now to ask the question to say, how do we do things differently? I think it's very important. Doing it differently is really to ensure that partnership is maybe more inclusive. Partnership is a table where everyone has the same seat, because private sector sometimes, for the sake of maybe money, the priority might not be the same. I would really recommend to bring the civil society on the table, to have a table where we are one team. The referee is part of that team, and we have only one place to actually score the goal. Because we need to do this together, and we shouldn't be inclusive, and we shouldn't be afraid of ensuring that we take inclusivity at the beginning of the design, because it is wrong for us to believe that, oh, I've done this analysis, and what about gender? It's too late. We need to ask that question at the beginning. So going away, I think we are going back to our own countries, different contexts, different background, different priority, different infrastructure, but a way for us to take those kind of learning and see how we can incorporate it within our framework. I think that is what I can actually give as an advice. But I'm here also to learn from the other session to see what are people thinking of.
Great.
Thank you.
Barnaby?
We are all aware that, and we agree, that data and statistics play a key role in the Agenda 230. And for that, we need to build trust. Because all the activities and projects to achieve the goals and targets are based on people. And those people need to rely on the government and all the actors. For that, the truth and the trust should be the major key. And for that, we need to build capacity, to develop capacity, statistical literacy, as we have said, digital literacy.
Leonardo?
Okay. We have already mentioned that Colombia is preparing the next United Nations World Data Forum, and we have identified equity and inclusion as one of the core topics for the event, because we are working through the lens that no one will be left behind. So equity and inclusion is one of the priorities for the next World Data Forum. Here it's important to acknowledge the value of citizen-generated data and open data partnerships that I have already mentioned in my interventions before, and also to work with the improvement of statistical literacy in our countries in order to get more inclusive data for everyone.
Good plug for next year. Jana?
I'm going to say, trust your instinct. Each of us, I think, has to trust our own instinct. Depending on who we are, where we are in this whole ecosystem, in this society, our perspective is unique. You, as a young person, in your field, you have a certain very unique perspective. And if your instinct tells you that there is something that's not quite right, you're probably right to observe that. And I think you should, and I'm sorry, I'm picking on you, but hopefully it's an illustrative example. And you should go after whatever you think is the right solution. I, in my perspective, am observing what I could do to fix something that I don't think is working optimally. And if it seems daunting and it feels daunting, it's probably the right thing to go after. And it may seem like an impossible task, and once you really start to look at the relationships and the connections and all the dynamics involved to make that happen, and you just want to stop, just like the SDGs themselves, all of this is very complex and intertwined and interconnected. Doesn't matter. I think each of us cannot waste our time on this planet Earth. We should go after what our instinct tells us is our purpose and is driving us. And we just have to keep trying, because what was impossible 2 years ago is actually probably quite possible this year, because there is political momentum, because there is better technology, because there is just broader awareness, and so on and so forth. And I think that diversity of perspectives is in fact what's going to make this whole mess kind of take us out of this and put us on this beautiful path to sustainable development. I don't mean to make light of it at the end, but I really think it's that. I think we should follow our instinct, be brave, and not put our efforts down.
Catalina, what would you like to see when we host this next year in Medellin, in your hometown?
I wait everybody in Medellin because I think we're going to be there talking about these great topics. But I want to finish with this simple phrase. Like, for me, we have to make the complex simple. Like, this is that we have to do. This is very complicated. EA is complex. Many things are complex. We need to make it easier for everybody so we can understand it, we can talk about it. So that is my closing phrase. We keep it simple, so then we can go on.
Well, I know we'll be digging into a lot of these issues further in the sessions to come, but please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists and thank them for their insights today. But before we wrap up, I would like to welcome to the stage Mr. Ning Jija to give a keynote closing remarks. And he's the Vice Chairman of the Committee on Economic Affairs of the 13th Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference National Committee. He's also the former Vice Chairman of the National Development and Reform Commission and former Commissioner of the National Bureau of Statistics of China. So, Mr. Jija, welcome to the stage. Thank you for joining us.
谢谢主持人凯特。我要纠正一下，我不仅是13届的政协经济委员会副主任，我还是14届的政协经济委员会副主任。虽然我从那个中国国家统计局局长职位下转到政协才1年多，对吧？这次会议的这个主题我听了以后，我印象非常深刻。一个就是加强创新合作。 再一个就是生产优质包容性的数据，包括我们主持人引导的非常好，提问都是非常精准，而且我们5位专家 回答的都是很有针对性，令我们印象深刻。这个我最大的一个印象就是我们这次这个会议本身就是体现了这个包容性，是吧？我们来自亚非拉美欧，是吧？这个因为我是亚洲，所以我算上我就是亚非拉美欧，这是包容性。同时呢，我们既有来自政府这个部门的，我们喀麦隆的局长，还有我们哥伦比亚的这个统计的方面的负责人，也有来自研究部门和这个国际组织的，是吧？这个同时我们不仅有来自国际性的组织，就是全球地球影响力，有非洲的研究组织，还有我们哥伦比亚的研究组织。特别令人印象深刻的是，5位专家加上主持人，正好是3位先生、3位女士，体现了男女50%对50%，最具包容性，是吧？即使加上我是坚定奉行男女平等的，还是50对50，啊，是。下面我讲这个3点体会啊。第一是积极构建更加包容优质的数据生态系统，对于各国数据生产和统计发展至关重要。当今世界，统计以及各方面的数字化这个转型啊，这个趋势啊是不可阻挡，是吧？新数据资源和新数据技术迭代推动数据生态系统加速升级，包括传统统计数据生产主体的政府统计部门在内的各方主体都必须积极应对。如果我们不能适应数字化转型和大数据运用的这个趋势，不能把新的数据资源注入传统的数据生产过程，不能呢兼顾全体居民，包括我们讲的这个弱势群体和这个刚才讲的拉美的这个原住民呢，都能够参与到这个数据生产进程过程中，来努力实现不让一个人在可持续发展中掉队的承诺，那么就会影响到政府部门统计和数据的权威性、公信力。第二，政府部门呢要在优质包容的数据生态系统中实现角色转换，在运用大数据可以精确掌握每一个个体数据的当下，有必要对传统的这个统计方法，是吧？包括这个普查、全面调查、抽样调查进行重新审视定位。刚才大家讲到，越来越多的互联网企业、咨询机构、媒体机构产生的新型数据资源，加工成许多有价值的，可以生成许多有价值的这个信息资料，包括日益丰富的电子化行政记录，包括刚才讲到即使是在非洲都发展得很快的这个电子商务的活动的记录，这些指数性倍增的互联网信息都对政府统计部门处理、分析、挖掘数据的能力和水平提出很多要求。所以政府统计部门呢，必须这个既做数据的生产者，又做数据的管理者，是吧？这方面提出了新的挑战。所以今天我注意到回答问题比较多的是我们这个喀麦隆局长，还有哥伦比亚我们这个负责信息的这个负责人呢，这样才能在多维数据生态系统中啊，产生新的这个职责定位，是吧？刚才大家举的例子，比如说对空气质量的数据观察啊、提示这个加强空气污染的治理啊等等，都表明这一点，就是不仅要生产数据，还要参与这个数据管理啊和发展的这个进程的管理。第三，以优质包容的数据生态系统推动构建数据合作伙伴关系。随着经济社会可持续发展，社会治理的精细化对数据提出了更多更高的要求。数据的服务对象向更细颗粒度的公民、基层和社会逐步延伸。 适应共建、共享、共治社会这个格局的新要求，必须创新数据理念，加强数据治理，科学划分统计部门、政府其他职能部门、企业、社会的数据边界，充分利用部门行政记录、统计数据以及社会上大数据，来建设一个新型的数据治理系统。特别我印象深的，刚才大家都讲到，要在国家层面上来推动构建数据的合作伙伴关系，是吧？包括这个来促进我们提升了统计能力，来缩小这个数据鸿沟，形成了基于共同的治理目标、多元主体共同参与、平等协商、合作共治的新型数据治理模式，提升社会治理的质量和效能。我注意到刚才除了我们围绕中心议题以外，还现场各位专家现场回答了关于数据素养平民科学，关于这个男女平等，关于富人年轻人这个数据参与是吧的等等问题，都回答的很有针对性，对我们都很有启发。特别是今天参加会的，既有我们第一次参加这个首次全球联合国世界数据论坛的，刚才我们非洲是吧，这位兄弟就说，我也是2017年初我也参加了第一次数据论坛，当时还安排我坐在主席台位置上，我很高兴，印象很深刻。那么下一次论坛呢，又会在这个本次论坛在北京，在这个中国召开，浙江召开，下一次论坛又会到哥伦比亚召开。刚才大家讲到的，我访问过哥伦比亚，我印象最深的就是哥伦比亚咖啡好喝，所以刚才大家讲到用咖啡这个过程呢，我来跟这个统计结合起来，我很有同感。我相信在座的很多人都愿意到哥伦比亚去参加下一次的世界这个联合国数据论坛。我们盼望的这个数据论坛，一个是这个本次数据论坛能够取得圆满成功，也盼望着下一次数据论坛能够早日到来。我就评价到这里，谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. Ningjija, so much for your closing remarks. We do have an inclusive panel here, and I think we're in the land of tea this year, and we'll be in the land of coffee next year, so no matter what, you'll be caffeinated, right? But that concludes our time for this evening. You all are now, the program for today is over, so you can enjoy the rest of your evening. I hope you're able to get out and see this beautiful city of Hangzhou. But make sure that you are back here early tomorrow morning for the second day. We'll dig into more of these issues. I don't think there's any debate over the importance of inclusivity, but it's more a matter of how we can all partner to get there together. So hopefully you all are having these conversations and can have those conversations in the next 2 days as follows. But again, thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much. Can you have a good
Yeah.
Thank you.